On the morning of my daughter's wedding, I stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing the words I'd say when we finally shared our first father-daughter dance. 15 years of missed birthdays, unanswered calls, and letters that never came back. I thought this dance would be my chance to tell her I never stopped loving her. But one phone call changed everything. "Don't expect a dance," she said, her voice flat, almost mechanical. Then the line went dead. I tried to convince myself it was just nerves, that she'd change her mind when the music started. At the reception, my heart pounded when the MC announced, "Now, for the bride's special dance." I stood, my legs trembling, eyes fixed on her. She looked right past me, and then she held out her hand to someone else, my former partner. My seat felt like quicksand as they took the stage, her beaming in the spotlight that should have been ours. As I sat there, drowning in the applause that wasn't for me, a quiet comment from a passing waiter made my blood run cold. She told us her father never sent her a single penny. 15 years of monthly transfers, gone without a word. My mind raced, and a dangerous thought took root. Maybe the distance between us wasn't built by my absence, but by someone else's lies. And if that's true, this wedding wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of the truth finally coming out. I've built houses that will stand for 50 years, maybe 100 if someone takes care of them. But I couldn't keep my own family together. My name's John. I'm 57 years old, a carpenter in a small town in Oregon. And 15 years ago, I lost the only thing that really mattered to me. My little girl, Emily. When she was born, I thought I understood the meaning of work. I'd been pulling 12-hour days since I was 20, sanding floorboards until my hands split, hauling timber until my back ached. But when she came along, I wanted to work even harder, to make sure she had everything. I used to tuck her in at night, kiss her forehead, and tell her, "You'll always be my number one project." She'd giggle like she knew I meant it. The divorce came when she was 8. It wasn't one big fight that ended us. It was 100 small ones. My business was struggling. I was gone too much. Her mother said she was tired of being married to a ghost, and the court agreed she'd be better off living with her mom. I got every other weekend, some holidays. It felt like I'd been given visitation rights to my own heart. I tried to make those weekends count. We'd build birdhouses together, paint them in the backyard, bake cookies, even though neither of us was any good at it. When she left on Sundays, I'd slip a little note into her backpack. Things like, "Love you always," or "Can't wait to see you again." I sent birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, and every month I mailed a check. The checks were never returned, but I never got a thank you card either. I told myself she was just busy. Kids grow up. The years rolled on. My jobs took me farther from home, sometimes 3 hours drive, sometimes out of state for weeks at a time. And when I'd call, I'd get short answers. "I'm fine." "School's fine." Sometimes I'd hear voices in the background and she'd say, "I gotta go." I didn't know then how much her mother's presence shaped those conversations. By the time Emily was 16, the space between us felt like another person in the room, one we both avoided looking at. On my end, I kept pushing through, sending gifts, transferring money, calling when I could. But on hers, I couldn't tell if she even wanted to bridge the gap. I remember her 18th birthday like it happened yesterday. I'd taken the day off work, bought her a silver bracelet, and drove 3 hours to surprise her. at her mom's house. I rang the bell. She opened the door, saw me, and her face froze. Not with joy, but something like alarm. She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped outside and shut the door behind her. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I wanted to wish you happy birthday in person," I said, holding out the small gift box. She didn't take it. "You can't just show up, Dad. You should have called." I stood there, box in hand, feeling like a fool. I thought you'd want to see me." She shook her head, soft but firm. "Not today." Then she went inside, closing the door gently but firmly in my face. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes before driving home. The bracelet stayed in my glove compartment for months. After that, I stopped showing up unannounced. I kept sending gifts, but I didn't expect to see her open them. The last time we spoke before her wedding was 2 years ago. Short call. She was busy. When I asked what was going on in her life, she told me about her job and mentioned someone special but didn't elaborate. I wanted to ask more, but I'd learned that pressing her only made her retreat further. Then, out of the blue, an envelope arrived in the mail. Heavy cardstock, elegant lettering, a wedding invitation. The return address was hers, but the handwriting wasn't. It was clearly from a printer. It said, "John Miller is invited to the wedding of Emily Rose Miller and Daniel Harper." No Dad, no personal note, just the date, time, and location. I held that card for a long time. I knew I wasn't the man she turned to anymore, but I thought maybe this was her way of opening a door, even a little. Maybe, just maybe, the wedding would be the place we could start over. I didn't know it yet, but the distance we'd built over the years wasn't going to collapse in one afternoon. If anything, it was about to get wider before it ever got smaller. For weeks after the invitation arrived, I told myself this was it, the moment to bridge the gap. I imagined the reception hall bathed in warm light, the sound of music swelling as I walked toward her. Our first dance, not just a tradition, but a truce. I bought a dark navy suit from a shop downtown, the kind that made me stand straighter. The tailor asked if it was for a special occasion, and I almost told him everything, but instead just said, "For my daughter's wedding." In the evenings, after long days at the workshop, I moved the coffee table aside and practiced a waltz in the living room. My dog would watch from the couch, head tilted, as I turned in slow, deliberate steps. I didn't care if I looked foolish. I wanted to be ready, to make the moment perfect if it came. The gift took longer. I chose a block of walnut, rich and dark, and spent hours carving it into a box with dovetail joints. On the lid, I etched a small pattern of intertwined roses and vines. Inside, I lined it with velvet and placed a photo of us from when she was 6, her hair in pigtails, her cheeks smudged with chocolate cake. In the corner of the photo, she was grinning at me like I was the whole world. I thought about what I'd say when I gave it to her. Maybe something simple like, "This is for you," from the man who's always been in your corner. I pictured her looking at that photo, realizing the years hadn't erased the bond we once had. Then, the day before the wedding, my phone rang. Emily's name lit up the screen. My heart kicked hard, as if the moment had come early. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Dad," she began, then paused. "Don't expect a dance tomorrow." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "What do you mean?" "It's complicated." Her tone was flat, clipped. "Complicated how?" I asked, gripping the phone tighter. "I thought maybe we could..." "Dad, I just don't think it's a good idea," she cut in. "I have to go." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, phone in hand, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly loud in the silence. I felt the same cold stillness I had outside her door on her 18th birthday. I'd convinced myself the wedding would be a bridge. Instead, it was beginning to feel like another wall. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her voice in my head. "Don't expect a dance." The words echoed like the thud of a door closing. I thought about every moment we'd missed. School plays, graduations, late night talks. I thought about the weekends we did have, wondering if they'd ever meant as much to her as they did to me. I wondered if she saw me as a stranger now, someone to be tolerated, but not embraced. I got up and paced the living room, the suit hanging on the back of a chair, the gift box sitting on the coffee table. The carved roses seemed almost mocking now, too tender for a man who was being told to stay in the shadows. I thought about not going at all, about saving myself the embarrassment, the ache of watching someone else fill the space I'd hoped to stand in. But another part of me, stubborn and tired of retreating, decided I would be there. I would watch her walk down the aisle. I would hand her that gift. And even if there was no dance, I would find some way to let her know that I was still here. When dawn finally came, it wasn't relief that woke me, but a kind of resigned determination. The day was coming, whether I wanted it or not. And somewhere deep down, I still hoped that maybe, in the swirl of music and lights, she might change her mind. I arrived at the venue an hour early, my gift tucked safely under my arm. The place was beautiful. Strings of lights hung from the rafters, white roses lined the tables, and a small band warmed up in the corner. I told myself I wasn't here for a dance anymore. I was here to see my daughter happy, to witness her day without expectations. That was the line I kept repeating, like a shield against disappointment. I found my seat toward the middle of the hall, then noticed a group of guests wandering uncertainly near the back. I got up, smiled, and helped them find their assigned table. Over the next half hour, I poured water into glasses, straightened chairs, even fetched an extra high chair for a couple with a toddler. Keeping busy made the minutes pass, and it stopped my mind from drifting to the conversation we'd had the day before. When the ceremony began, my breath caught. Emily looked radiant in her gown, her hair swept up, her eyes shining. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her smile like that. As she walked down the aisle on Daniel's arm, her fiancé's arm, I let myself imagine, just for a heartbeat, that maybe she still thought of me with some kind of fondness. The vows were heartfelt. The kiss met with applause, and soon we were all ushered into the reception hall. Dinner was served, glasses clinked, and I laughed politely when someone told a joke at our table. I thought, maybe this is enough. Maybe being here quietly, supporting her from a distance, is my role now. Then the MC's voice boomed over the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the bride's special dance." My heart slammed against my ribs. My hands went clammy. Without thinking, I pushed my chair back and began to rise. This was it. The part of the night I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times. But before I could take a step, Emily's gaze swept the crowd. When her eyes reached me, they didn't soften. They skipped right over, as if I were any other guest. She turned to the far side of the room and smiled. "Would you join me?" she asked. And from the crowd, stepping into the light, came Mark, her stepfather. He was dressed in a sharp gray suit, grinning as he took her hand. A cheer rose from the guests. The band struck the first notes of a slow song, and the spotlight followed them onto the dance floor. I froze, halfway between standing and sitting, my body unsure of which way to go. My knees felt like they might give out entirely. They moved together easily, Emily laughing at something he whispered. She rested her head briefly on his shoulder, and the room seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Around me, people murmured about how touching it was, how Mark had been there for her all these years. Then a man at the next table leaned toward me, his voice low but clear. She told everyone you were never around, said you didn't send her a dime. The words hit harder than the sight of the dance. My mind reeled. 15 years of monthly transfers, holiday bonuses, and cash slipped into cards. Gone. Erased, as if they'd never happened. I wanted to shout, to tell the man he was wrong, but the music was loud, and my throat felt tight. I sank back into my seat. My hands rested on the gift box, the carved roses under my fingertips. I stared at the photo inside in my mind's eye, the chocolate-smudged grin of a little girl who used to run into my arms. That girl wouldn't have believed I'd abandoned her. The song ended with a flourish, the crowd erupting into applause. Mark kissed Emily's cheek, and she beamed up at him. My chest ached, and for the first time that night, I wasn't sure if I could sit through the rest of the evening. I slipped out of the reception hall between toasts, the air inside suddenly too thick to breathe. Outside, the night was cooler, the muffled hum of music bleeding through the walls. I stood near the catering tent, hands in my pockets, trying to steady my pulse. The stars above the vineyard were bright, scattered like nails on a dark plank. A young waiter stepped out, carrying an empty tray. He recognized me from earlier when I'd helped him set up tables. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" he said, setting the tray on a cart. I nodded. "Sure is." He hesitated, glancing toward the hall, then back at me. "You're Emily's dad, right? The biological one." The phrasing caught me off guard. "Yes." He gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "She told us during the rehearsal dinner yesterday how her stepdad's been the only real father she's had. Said her birth father never sent her a single penny." The words landed like a hammer to the chest. For a moment, I thought I might actually be sick. "She said that?" My voice felt strange in my own ears, rougher, slower. He nodded, unaware of the way the ground had just shifted beneath me. She talked about how Mark paid for her school trips, her lessons, all that. Everyone thought it was so sweet. Then he shrugged and went back inside. I stayed where I was, staring at the gravel under my shoes. 15 years of checks mailed on time. 15 years of cash slipped into cards, wire transfers, and birthday envelopes. I could see them in my mind. Stacks of carbon copy receipts, canceled checks with my signature, bank statements showing every transaction. And now, hearing her words, I understood something I hadn't dared to before. She'd been told those payments never existed. The only person who could have made that happen was her mother. The woman I'd once promised forever to had taken my efforts, my money, and turned them invisible in my daughter's eyes. It wasn't just neglect she thought I was guilty of. It was abandonment. I pressed a hand to the back of my neck, the muscles tight as wire. The urge to march back into that hall, interrupt whatever was happening, and lay out the truth right there in front of everyone was almost unbearable. I pictured standing in the spotlight, telling the whole room exactly where the money had gone, watching the shock on Emily's face. But another image followed close behind. Her wedding day, collapsing under the weight of my accusation, her face twisting in anger, maybe never speaking to me again. I let out a long breath. This wasn't the place. Not tonight. I straightened my shoulders and made a decision. I would gather every piece of proof I had, every bank statement, every canceled check, every email confirming a transfer. I would line them up so there would be no doubt. And when the time came, I'd show Emily. Not to humiliate her, not to get revenge, but to give her the truth her mother had kept from her for nearly half her life. When I returned to the reception, the music had shifted to something fast and lively. People were laughing, spinning on the dance floor. I took my seat again, the gift box still resting on the table in front of me. My hands lingered on the lid, tracing the carved roses. I thought about giving it to her tonight, but the moment no longer felt right. That photo inside, of a little girl who once loved me without question, deserved to be seen when the air was clear between us, so I kept it closed. I smiled when people made conversation, clapped when the cake was cut, and even posed for a group photo when someone insisted. But all the while, my mind was already moving, making lists, picturing stacks of documents laid out on my kitchen table. The truth had been buried for too long. And if this wedding was the stage for lies, then somewhere down the line, I'd make sure there was a stage for the truth. A week after the wedding, I called Emily. She answered on the third ring, her voice guarded. "Hi, Dad." "Hey," I said, forcing my tone to stay even. "Would you meet me for coffee? Just half an hour. There's something important I want to show you." A pause. "Okay, but I can't stay long." We met at a small cafe near her apartment, the kind with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls drifting from the kitchen. I was already at a corner table when she walked in, her hair pulled back, a neutral expression on her face. She sat across from me, her purse resting on her lap like a shield. "I appreciate you coming," I began. I slid a thick manila folder across the table. "I need you to see what's inside." She hesitated before opening it. Her eyes scanned the first few pages, bank statements, copies of checks, transaction confirmations. Then she turned to a photo I'd included, a picture of her at 12, holding the bike I'd sent for her birthday. A note in my handwriting was still taped to the handlebar. Her eyes flicked up to mine. "What is all this?" "It's proof," I said quietly. "Every month for 15 years, I sent money. For school trips, clothes, birthdays. I never missed one. You were told I never helped, but that isn't true." She flipped through more pages, her fingers stiff. Her breathing changed, quicker, shallower. I could almost see the gears turning, the careful walls she'd built over the years straining under the weight of the evidence. Then she set the folder down and pushed it back toward me. Mum said you disappeared, that you didn't want to be part of my life, that you left us with nothing." I kept my gaze steady. "I know what she said, and I know why you believed it. You were a kid. She was the parent you saw every day." Her voice sharpened. "So now you're telling me she lied? For 15 years? "I'm telling you I was there, even if you didn't see me," I replied. "I'm not asking you to forgive me for not being around enough. I just want you to know the truth." She looked away, out the window, where rain had started tapping against the glass. This doesn't erase the fact that you weren't there in person. I know, I said, and I take responsibility for that. But don't let anyone rewrite the part where I cared, because I always did. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. She picked up the folder again, leafing through it more slowly this time. When she reached the last page, she closed it and set her hand on top. "Why now?" she asked. "Why wait until after the wedding to show me this?" "Because I didn't want to ruin your day," I said simply. "You deserve to have that without a scene. This isn't about making a spectacle. It's about making sure you know the truth." She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, slipping the folder into her purse. "I have to go." I nodded, swallowing the urge to say more. She turned toward the door, but before stepping outside, she looked back over her shoulder. "If what you're saying is true," she said, her voice quieter now, "then you're not the only one who's been lied to." Before I could ask what she meant, she pushed the door open and disappeared into the drizzle. I sat there for a few minutes, replaying her words. Not the only one. Did she mean her stepfather? Someone else in the family? My mind spun with possibilities, each more tangled than the last. The waitress came by to clear our cups. "Everything okay?" she asked. I gave a non-committal shrug. Not sure yet. As I walked back to my truck, I felt the weight of that folder's absence. It was in her hands now. The proof was no longer just mine to guard. She could throw it away, lock it in a drawer, or read it over and over until the truth settled in. Driving home, I kept hearing her last words, each repetition pulling them into sharper focus. If she'd been lied to about me, what else had she been told? What other stories had been crafted to shape the way she saw her life? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, the gift box for her still on the counter. I traced the carved roses again, thinking about the photo inside. The little girl in that picture didn't know about betrayals or half-truths. She just knew her dad was someone she could trust. I wondered if we could ever get back to that. Or if the damage had been too deliberate, too deeply woven into the fabric of her memories. But one thing was certain. Her reaction at the cafe wasn't final. There was a door cracked open now, even if just a sliver. The question was, what would come through it next? 2 weeks passed before I heard from her again. I'd stopped checking my phone every hour, telling myself that silence was its own kind of answer. Then one evening, her message lit up the screen. "Dinner tomorrow night. I have something to tell you." I didn't sleep much that night. By the time I arrived at the small Italian place she'd chosen, my stomach was knotted tighter than a carpenter's clamp. She was already there, sitting at a table by the window, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. There was no defensiveness in her voice this time, but no easy warmth either. We ordered, made small talk about the weather, the city traffic. Then she leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. "I talked to Mom," she began, "about everything you showed me." My pulse quickened. "And?" She admitted it. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were hard. She said she used the money you sent to pay off her own debts, credit cards, personal loans, things she didn't want me to know about. And she told me it was better for me to believe you'd walked away, because she didn't want me looking to you for anything. I stared at her, the words sinking like stones. Even after all my suspicions, hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. She actually said that? Emily nodded. We had a huge fight. I told her I deserved to know the truth. She tried to justify it, said she was protecting me, but she couldn't explain why she let me grow up, thinking my own father didn't care. There was a long silence between us, the kind where every unsaid thing presses on your chest. I'm sorry, she said finally, for the way I treated you at the wedding, for a lot of things. I can't change how I felt all those years, but I can't ignore what I know now. You don't owe me an apology, I said, my voice low, but I'm grateful for it. She gave a faint smile. I'm not ready to start calling you Dad in front of everyone, not yet, but I do want to spend more time with you, figure out who we are to each other now. That's all I could ever ask, I said. Dinner passed more easily after that. We talked about her work, her honeymoon plans, even laughed a couple of times. When we stepped outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. Back at my place, I offered to make coffee. She followed me into the kitchen, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. Her eyes landed on the gift box, still sitting on the counter. Is that for me? I nodded, sliding it toward her. Made it before the wedding. Didn't feel like the right moment then. She lifted the lid slowly. The photo stared back at her. Chocolate smudges, pigtails, the grin of a little girl who hadn't yet learned to doubt me. Her fingers traced the frame, and when she looked up, her eyes were wet. I remember this day, she said softly. I thought you'd forgotten it. Never, I said. She set the box aside, wiping her eyes. So, you said you'd been practicing a waltz? I chuckled. I did. Didn't get to use it. Well, she said, stepping into the middle of the kitchen. You can show me now. We moved the chairs back. I took her hand, placed my other on her shoulder, and started the steps. Almost immediately, I went left when I should have gone right. She laughed, the sound light and unguarded. You're terrible at this, she said. I told you, I grinned. I needed the practice. We kept going, tripping over each other, laughing until my sides hurt. And somewhere in the middle of that clumsy kitchen dance, I realized the gap between us didn't feel quite so wide anymore. It wasn't the father-daughter dance I'd imagined, but maybe it was better, because it was real, and it was ours.